Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking a journey. Well, far beyond the familiar shores of Middle-earth.
Hmm.
We are not interested in the well-worn paths of the Lord of the Rings, and frankly, we're not even satisfied with the stately, sorrowful history laid out in the Silmarillion.
Not the published one, anyway.
Exactly. We are going deeper. We are diving into the absolute foundational source material. J.R.R. Tolkien's The Book of Lost Tales, Part 1.
This is the Genesis. I mean, this is it. We're talking about the mythology as it existed in, 1916 and 1917?
Yeah.
Tolkien was a young man, barely 25, starting this massive imaginative work while, serving in the trenches of the First World War. It's raw, it's intense.
And it's so different.
It's structurally, emotionally, and cosmologically different from what you think you know.
It truly is. And, this dive comes with a warning that Tolkien himself gave. He suggested that part of the magic of The Lord of the Rings was these glimpses of a large history in the background.
Right, like seeing towers of a distant city gleaming in a sunlit mist.
Such a perfect image.
He was wary of revealing too much. He famously said, "To go there is to destroy the magic, unless new unattainable vistas are again revealed."
And we are accepting that risk.
We are, because what we find here are those truly new, wild vistas. We are taking the longitudinal view of Middle-earth history.
And what we see initially looks almost like a high fantasy fever dream.
Oh, absolutely. The elves are explicitly called fairies.
The dwarves are entirely an evil people forged by Melko.
And major characters are just. They're radically inverted. Beren, the great mortal hero, he was originally an elf, not a man.
And his most terrifying antagonist was Tevildo, the Prince of Cats.
The Prince of Cats. It's a mythology in flux, a world where the gods have loud arguments and the physical properties of light and water are almost cartoonishly immediate.
It's less a grand epic and more like a collection of ancient, powerful fairy stories trying to become a unified world history.
That's a great way to put it.
So our mission today is to unpack how this vibrant, contradictory mythology started, the frame narrative that anchors it to England.
The cosmic song that turns to discord.
The surprisingly physical gods, and the great tragedy of Valinor. We are looking for those nuggets of knowledge that survived, and, those that were completely abandoned.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
So to even begin reading these tales, we have to understand who is telling them, and just as importantly, why.
This is so essential, because it gives us a window into Tolkien's initial purpose for this whole mythology, which was linking it directly back to England.
It all begins with a traveler, Eriol.
Eriol, right. He is a mariner, a stranger, who has sailed across the ocean from the great lands, and he lands upon the lonely isle, Eressëa.
And the tales are presented as what he learns there from the inhabitants, from the elves.
Yeah, and he finds this peculiar dwelling, the Mar Vanwa Talieva.
Which translates to the cottage of lost play.
And the description of this house, it just immediately transports you to this realm of pure hidden magic. It's hosted by two elves, Lindo and Veri.
But what stands out is this required gesture of humility to even get inside.
Yes. The dwelling is small, but anyone who enters must be very small indeed, or of their own good wish, become as very little folk even as they stand upon the threshold.
It's a return to a state of receptive, almost unburdened childhood.
You have to be. It sets the tone perfectly. You can't come here with the gravitas of the great lands. You must become a child again to hear the world's oldest stories.
And Veri explains the history of the house, and its original purpose in Valinor was, it was almost preventative.
It was. It was originally called the Cottage of the Children, or the Play of Sleep. It sat near the Olori Mali.
The Path of Dreams.
The Path of Dreams. And this is a really profound piece of early world building that clarifies the Valar's relationship with mortality.
So what was the specific danger they were trying to prevent by using this cottage?
The danger was spiritual and emotional heartbreak for men. The cottage was designed to gently guide the children of mankind's ancestors, down that path of dreams away from the great elvish city of Kor.
Because if the men saw the full glory of Valinor,
they would be forever enamored.
Exactly. And if they stayed, they'd cause great grief to their mortal kin back home who would miss them.
But if they saw Kor's splendor and then returned to their own mortality,
they would long forever vainly, becoming strange, wild, and disconnected among men.
So the cottage was a deliberate, magical effort by the Valar to protect mortal hearts from the pain of immortality.
It was a barrier built out of compassion. But now, since the elves left Kor and the lane was blocked by great impassable rocks, its original function is gone. It's obsolete.
So it's become the cottage of lost play, built by Lindo and Very using good magic.
And the purpose shifted from preventing pain to preserving memory. Lindo and Very treasure these old tales and songs, and their children, the little folk, fare forth again to find the great lands.
So they're whispering comfort and ancient tales to lonely children back in the world.
It's a beautifully poignant origin for fairy tales themselves. They are the elves' children seeking to comfort lonely mortals. But the truly radical element, for anyone familiar with the later legendarium, is the geographical anchor provided by Eriol.
This is the big one.
His later name is Elfwine, which means elf friend, and he is explicitly tied to the Anglo-Saxon period of English history.
Yes, this is the explicit connection that Tolkien ultimately felt compelled to remove. In this earliest conception, the mythology wasn't just inspired by England, it was quite literally the prehistory of England.
Eressëa, the lonely isle where Eriol lands,
Was destined to become England.
wow. And the elvish city of Cortarion, the very town Eriol visits, was intended to become the modern English town of Warwick.
It binds the high fantasy directly to his own local landscape. Imagine walking through Warwick and knowing that, in the mythology's foundation, those stones were once the heart of an elvish city.
It tells us so much about his initial impulse. He was creating a mythological history for his own land, a land he felt lacked its own deep, ancient saga.
So that raises the big question. Why did this connection have to be abandoned later? It's such a compelling idea that the magic is here, right beneath our feet.
It seems like as the world expanded, it just became untenable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once the mythos became truly continental, with Beleriand, Numenor, and the eventual Spherical world trying to keep Warwick as Cortarion and Eressëa as England, became restrictive, maybe even limiting to the universality of the saga.
It was a casualty of scale.
A casualty of scale, but it shows us just how intimate and localized the genesis of Middle-earth truly was.
Okay, so stepping out from that cozy, intimate cottage of lost play, we have to pivot to the macrocosm, creation itself. The concept of Ilúvatar and the music of the Ainur is already present, but the details, they reveal a slightly different emphasis.
They do. Ilúvatar, sometimes just called Ilu, first sang the Ainur, originally Ienu, into being. They are the primeval spirits. Then the Ainur took the themes that Ilúvatar gave them and fashioned them into great music.
It's described as a sound of mighty melodies, mingling, dissolving, and changing amid the thunder of harmonies. Just immense.
Immense, but the beautiful promise is what gives this early creation story such hope. It's stated that a mightier music shall be woven before the seat of Ilúvatar, by the choirs of both Ainur and the sons of men after the great end.
And that is critical.
It's so critical, it foregrounds men, the children of Ilúvatar, in the ultimate destiny of the universe. The Ainur alone could not perfect the theme. That perfection requires the inclusion of mortality and its unique contributions.
Men are necessary for the final, ultimate harmony.
Yes.
But of course, that harmony is immediately shattered by discord, led by Melko, the early form of Melkor.
Who was among the most powerful of the Ainur, he interwove matters of his own vain imagining.
And his motivation is key here.
It is. He had a very hot desire to bring things into being of his own, to be a true creator, not merely a musician following another's theme. He was seeking the secret fire,
The flame imperishable.
which grants life and reality. That fire dwelleth with Ilúvatar, and not with the Ainur.
The philosophical backbone of the entire legendarium is built right here, in this paradox of evil. Melko tries to make things outside of the plan.
But Ilúvatar proclaims that no theme can be played, save it comes in the end of Ilúvatar's self.
Which means that he who attempts to alter the music finds himself only aiding me in devising a thing of still greater grandeur and more complex wonder.
So Melko's chaos, which introduced fire, sorrow, wrath, and evil, is ultimately subverted. The discord becomes an integral, if painful, part of a richer, more complex symphony.
It's the ultimate theological justification for why evil exists in a world created by a benevolent higher power.
Exactly. It's not a mistake. It's an element that adds complexity that was perhaps originally unimagined, but ultimately controlled. And it's fascinating how clearly defined that theological framework is right from the start.
Now, let's turn to the actual physical structure of the world, because this is one of the most vividly different aspects of the Lost Tales.
The cosmology.
Yeah. It's built around the outer seas, Vi.
This is where we see the physical imagination at its peak. Vi, the outer seas, is wild and non-terrestrial. It has no tides, it is very cool and thin, and no boat can sail or fish swim in it.
Except, of course, for the magical vessels of Ulmo.
Naturally. And the reason for this strange nature is profound. Ulmo later reveals that the whole world is an ocean, Vi, on which the Earth floats, upheld by the word of Iluvatar.
The Earth isn't a static planet, it's a floating object.
This concept is incredibly powerful, and Tolkien actually produced a very early and remarkable drawing that visualizes this. The world, in section, is presented as a huge Viking ship floating upon Vi.
A Viking ship Earth. That is such a striking and memorable image.
Isn't it? It links the high creation myth to the powerful nautical traditions that Tolkien loved. The flat Earth we know, the great lands in Valinor, is essentially the deck and hull of this great cosmic vessel.
And so how does that physical structure play out in this story?
It makes the world feel small, tangible, and navigable, despite the dangers of the Vi. Ulmo, the sea fella, has his halls, Ulmonan, located secretively beneath the Earth's dark keel, within the ship's hull.
So when the Valar shift the world or raise mountains, they are fundamentally altering the structure of this ship.
Precisely.
But this immediately forces us to confront the contradiction with later Middle-earth history. Eventually, the world is changed or made round when Numenor falls.
Right.
So how does this early Viking ship model square with that later catastrophe?
It doesn't really. In the Lost Tales, the world is structurally flat, supported by Iluvatar's word. The later catastrophic change, the flattening of the straight road and the making of Arda into a sphere, is simply unimaginable within this early framework.
It feels more like a classical cosmology, like the Norse or Egyptian world tree concepts.
That's a perfect comparison. It's not a precursor to a spherical planet. It suggests that when Tolkien decided to integrate real-world geography and, Newtonian physics later, which he eventually did, this beautifully simple nautical cosmological model had to be sunk entirely.
It was too limiting.
Absolutely.
Well,
The Viking ship Earth is a wonderful artifact of the myth's earliest, most intimate phase. Imaginative, but not sustainable in a truly comprehensive world history.
okay, so if the cosmology is different, the gods who inhabit it are even more surprisingly so.
Oh, yeah.
The Valar in the Silmarillion are often grave, majestic, prone to sorrow. In the Lost Tales, they retain their power but possess a surprisingly robust, physical, and often humorous personality.
There is a notable lack of the heavy solemnity that later characterizes them. They are less like distant monotheistic archangels and more like a pantheon of classical or Norse gods.
With petty grievances and competitive streaks,
It gets
we still have the core structure. Manwe Sulimo, Lord of Gods and Elves, dwells on Tenikidil, clad in sapphires, surrounded by hawks that bring him news.
And he's consistently benevolent towards men. As the source notes, he is never of intent done ill to them. And Oli the Smith remains the tireless craftsman.
Right, he's described as busied with tools, metals, alphabets, and husbandry.
A truly polymath god, interested in everything from language to farming. It's from him that the Noldoli, the gnomes, learn their essential lore and crafts.
But the real shift in tone comes with the sea gods, Ulmo and Osai.
Oh, their interactions.
It feels less like cosmic stewardship and more like sibling rivalry.
It really does. They are magnificent, but they are clearly competing. Osei fares about in a foam of business, anchoring islands and controlling the lesser seas.
But when Ulmo performs the great service of transporting the shoreland elves across the water,
The script notes, he marvelously fares at the rear in his fishy car and trumpets loudly for the discomfiture of Osei.
he is literally flexing on Osi with his massive magical car and a loud trumpet blast.
And Osei retaliates. He feels slighted, maybe because Ulmo took his island car unasked to ferry the elves. So during Ulmo's return journey, also cast massive storms.
But the best part of this rivalry occurs later, after Tol Eressëa is anchored.
The revenge of Osei.
Yes.
He anchors the Lonely Isle perfectly, but then, in a fit of spite, he sets hostile seabirds, gulls, puffins, gannets on the island's cliffs.
Causing a chattering and a smell of fish.
He inflicts noise and bad odor on the island of the elves as punishment for Ulmo's perceived slight.
That is just brilliant. The ultimate cosmic revenge is inflicting environmental misery. Why do you think Tolkien completely excised this kind of tone later on?
I believe it's linked to the growing seriousness of the themes. The more Tolkien integrated the war narratives, the greater the need for the Valar to be figures of solemn, immutable judgment and power.
You can't have the ultimate forces of creation having a territorial dispute over fish smells when the entire world is under siege.
Exactly. It reflects a maturation from high-level fairy story to foundational mythology. It's a sacrifice of charm for gravitas.
Precisely. But we must turn now to the Valar who deal with death, because here the tone darkens dramatically, and we hit a major theological contradiction.
The fate of men.
We have Vafantur, who later becomes Mondos, and Fui, who later becomes Nienna, the Vala of Mourning.
And Fui's description is perhaps the most intense in the entire text. She labors at the distilling of salt humors whereof are tears, and she weaves black clouds that settle on the world as despairs and hopeless mourning.
She is the judge of men, and she embodies sorrow at a fundamental physical level.
And her judgment leads directly to a fate for men that is almost unrecognizable to the later legendarium. This is the moment where the Christian theological framework is most explicitly imposed.
Absolutely. After Fui judges them, the souls of men are separated into 3 distinct fates. Some wait in Mandos,
Which is explicitly described as a kind of purgatory.
Others, seized by Melko, are borne away to Engamandi, the Hells of Iron.
A clear parallel to hell.
And a few, the happy indeed, go to dwell with the gods in Valinor, the reward of heaven.
This tripartite system of afterlife is perfectly consistent with medieval Christian teaching. But it stands in deep contradiction to the central doctrine of the later published Silmarillion.
Which insists that death is the gift of Ilúvatar.
Right. That gift grants men freedom from the world's fate, allowing them to depart entirely, unbound by the Ainur's music or the fate of Arda.
So we have 2 completely different ideas about mortality operating simultaneously in Tolkien's mind in 1917. How do we reconcile that early conflict?
We don't really. This section proved that Tolkien was still actively struggling with how to integrate his deep Catholic faith with a purely invented pagan mythology.
The ultimate solution, the gift of death as freedom, was a radical theological innovation.
It was necessary to make the legendarium internally consistent and non-parochial. The concept of an elvish purgatory, an elvish heaven, and an elvish hell for men just didn't fit the grander cosmic narrative he eventually settled on.
It's a fascinating snapshot of the moment he was trying to figure out the metaphysical rules of the universe he was building.
And the fact that he discarded this purgatory hell-heaven framework shows the bravery involved in creating a truly unique secondary world philosophy.
So the Valar, having exiled Melko, resolved to build Valinor, the Blessed Realm, as a fortress of peace and light.
And this physical construction required geoengineering on a massive scale.
Olli and his folk undertook the labor of building the massive mountains of Valinor. They were reared to be rugged, of impregnable height, acting as a bulwark against evil from the north.
And the source material emphasizes the sheer cost of this construction.
Yes, the Valar took all the stone and rock necessary from the region called Erumani or Arvalin, making that area very broad and bare and of a marvelous level.
That's a powerful image. The walls of paradise were built by stripping the neighboring land down to a vast empty plain.
And within that newly protected realm, Olli's wife, Pelurian the Earth Lady, wove enchantments to prepare the ground for the creation that would define the era, the Two Trees.
The Two Trees. And the details of Laurelin, the gold tree, and Silpion, the silver, are gorgeous, but again, they are strikingly physical in this early version.
Laurelin put forth flowers like a myriad hanging lamps of flame, and its light was noisy. It splashed upon the ground with a sweet noise.
And Silpion, the silver tree, was more slender, and its light had a throb, causing a continual flutter of shadows, almost like a beating heart.
The crucial early distinction, though, is that the light was not just radiance. It was a physical liquid substance. It was the tree's sap.
And this liquid light was harvested and stored in 2 great vessels, Cullulan, which was gold, and Cylindrin, which was silver.
And every 12 hours, this liquid light was poured out to water the roots of the opposing tree.
Imagine the sound and spectacle of that. It makes the light something tangible that can be physically managed and handled, almost like a divine oil.
And this liquid nature of light is directly tied to the arrival of the Elves and their subsequent craft.
It is. Oromi found the awakening Eldar at Koivineni, the Waters of Awakening, in Pallasor. And there were 3 kindreds present, reflecting a slightly different naming convention.
We had the Teleri, who are the later Vanir, led by Inwe.
The Noldoli, or Gnomes, who become the Noldor, led by Nolami, who becomes Finwë.
And the Solasimpi, the Shoreland Pipers, who are the later Teleri, led by Tinwe Linto.
And the Noldoli immediately became the focus of craft, thanks to their connection with Oli. They were the ones who used the liquid light from the trees, starlight from Varda, and earthly substances to invent and fashion the first gems.
This is a major origin point. Opals, diamonds, rubies, sapphires. These things were not in the world before the Eldar.
The Noldoli's skill wasn't just in shaping existing materials. They were creating entirely new substances by synthesizing the divine light with the matter of the world.
And their immediate wealth and pride are established by their prodigality.
Oh yeah, they made gems in immeasurable number and simply cast them about the margin of the seas.
Ose, the sea vala, saw the moon gleam twinkling on the heaps of diamonds and crystals, which the gnomes tossed aside carelessly.
Which just shows the initial, almost reckless nature of their genius. This establishes the Noldoli's central flaw, their immense pride and their profound attachment to material beauty long before Melko even has a chance to corrupt them.
They already had the seeds of excess.
Absolutely.
So with the light established and the Noldoli thriving in their excessive glory, Melko's envy and rage reached their peak.
The stage is set for the inevitable tragedy, the darkening of Valinor.
Melko, confined in the north, observed Valinor's splendor and resolved on a devastating act of sabotage. His initial preparation is physical and brutal.
He steals a herd of black horses from Aromi's stables, a very specific, almost mythological theft.
And his entry into Valinor is almost anticlimactic in its means, highlighting a moment of Valar carelessness that had profound consequences.
Precisely. Melko did not breach the impregnable height of the mountains. He found a low gap that Olli and Tulkas had carelessly left open for their own convenience during the mountain-building project.
A failure of security, a vulnerability created by the Valar themselves.
And he brought with him Weirolomi, the Gloom Weaver.
The monstrous spider of night, a key early figure who is the clear precursor to Ungoliant.
As Silpion, the silver tree, was in bloom, Melko summoned his might and wounded Laurelin with a sword. The fiery radiance that erupted should have destroyed them both.
But Gloomweaver cast herself down and lapped it thirstily, plying her lips to the wound.
She literally sucked the life and strength from both trees, leaving them withered husks. It's an act of profound biological violation. The light is liquid, and she consumes it.
Tulkas, the mighty warrior Vala, immediately launches a furious hunt. He is described as leaping sure-footed in the dimness and scaling the mountain wall 7 times in his rage.
But Melko, aided by the darkness created by Gloomweaver, escapes northward. Farda follows, bearing a blazing star as a torch, attempting to pierce the gloom.
But the physical darkening is only half the treachery. Simultaneously, Melko corrupts the minds of the Noldoli.
He tells them they are prisoners, brought to Valinor out of the Valar's covetous and jealousy for their craftsmanship.
And he poisons them with the truth about the future. The world was being reserved for a race unborn men.
And this confirmation, even if delivered with malicious intent, gave Fëanor and the Noldi a powerful pretext for rebellion. They felt robbed of their destiny as the lords of the whole world.
The rebellion culminates in the tragic kinslaying. Fëanor persuaded the Noldoli that the only way to escape the judgment of the Valar was to take the ships of the Solosimpi.
The Shoreland Pipers at Swanhaven Copus Elcolinton.
And the Shoreland Pipers resisted fiercely, leading to a brutal internal conflict, the first instance of elves spilling elvish blood.
The Noldoli forcibly took the vessels, an act they would later most bitterly repent, and which sealed their doom.
The fleeing gnomes then faced the arduous journey north. They had to cross the Kurkuringa, the Chill Gulf.
A strait described with fearsome detail. It was filled with treacherous crevasses and, most terrifyingly, the fearsome eddy named Weirruin, which could suck ships down to monstrous depths. It was a passage designed by nature to be utterly impassable.
And as they passed the deep path from Mandos, they received the prophecies of Omnos.
A servant of Veventur warned the fleeing host, listing their future evils and ending with the mysterious, "Great is the fall of Gondolin."
None of the Noldoli understood the gravity of the warning, as Tyrande, who becomes Turgon, was not yet born in the Great Lands.
But it foreshadows the inevitable doom tied to their oath and their flight. The very stones of the world are warning them of their fate.
How did they survive that terrible march across the ice?
It was an ironic, miserable twist of fate provided by Melko himself. Melko's powerful presence in the far north caused the ice to pack and jam, creating a temporary, miserable bridge over the Sound of Kurkuringa.
So had the ice remained mobile, they would have been lost entirely.
It would have been. And the text gives us that fascinating insight into their temporary half-divine state.
They were able to endure that dreadful passage, the starvation, the cold, the sheer physical exertion, only because of the food and drink they had consumed in Valinor.
They were half-divine still, protected by the blessed sustenance of the gods. This is crucial because it suggests that had they been mortal men, they would have perished immediately. Their immortality provided resilience.
But the text is clear. The full reality of their mortality, the eventual waning of their strength, was still to set in as they moved further from the light.
It's a temporary divine boost that fuels their great folly.
The great tragedy of the darkening forced the Valar into a reckoning. They realized they had failed to achieve the wider designs of Iluvatar by keeping the light purely for themselves.
And that's a major theological admission of failure.
A moment of profound humility.
It is. They decide they must light not just Valinor, but all the Dark Earth, specifically to hinder Melko's ability to move and operate under cover of shadow. This requires a monumental effort to replace the trees.
The first step is the sun. Yavanna undertakes a great agonizing spell, struggling against the fate that had destroyed the tree.
And Laurelin yields a single final fruit of noon.
Ollie the smith then crafts the vessel Sari or Glorvent, the sun ship, from its rind. The light requires a divine conductor.
And Erwendi, one of the Valar's maidens, volunteers to become its radiant mistress.
Her preparation is so detailed. She and her maidens bathe in the Tanya Selpi, a pool of fire emerging transformed.
Their bodies were grown loosened and shone as with an ardor within. They become physically part of the light itself.
But the sunship climbs, blazing hotter and brighter than the trees ever did. It pierces the deep gloom. But this third essay of the gods immediately creates an unintended consequence.
It's too much, too fast, and too harsh.
Lorien, the Lord of Dreams and Sleep, weeps over the intensity. He complains, "Call back your glittering ship, for the eyes of us ache by reason of its flaming, and beauty and soft sleep is driven far away."
His gentle domains are ruined. His nightingales are silenced by the heat, his poppies withered. He laments that this is not the old loveliness of Laurelin.
Which highlights the complexity of creation. Solving one problem, darkness, immediately creates another, overwhelming harshness.
And the destruction of delicate beauty. But Lorien's sorrow, of Vala's grief, leads directly to the creation of the moon.
He touches Silpion's wound, and a final, pale, throbbing flower grows. The rose of Silpion.
The Valar take this final flower and craft the moon ship Ilsalunte, aiding the construction with crystals and delicate glass recovered from Fëanor's secret stores in Cernumen. Uali Cuvion becomes the steersman.
The moon, however, is not as resilient. Its light is less fiery, and it returns often to Valinor to be refreshed.
And we get the literal origin of the Man in the Moon legend here. The moon's surface bears the faint marks of its bruising and its fall, which men can still see clearly.
It's the lesser light, eternally bearing the scars of its construction and its necessity.
It provides solace, but it also reflects fragility.
With the lights established, the final act is to bind them to a schedule, to introduce predictability.
The work of the three sons of time, Danuin, Ranuin, and Fanuin.
And Fanuin undertakes the greatest task. He binds both sun and moon with the invisible, unbreakable fetters of time.
The rope of years. He fastens this rope to a great rock on Manwee's mountain, Tanicatil.
And this act, the introduction of rigid, predictable time, has massive cosmic implications that go far beyond just setting a calendar.
It profoundly affects the immortals themselves. The source material is unequivocal. This binding meant that all the world and its dwellers, both gods and elves and men, were bound about in the bonds of time.
So the gods themselves, should encountered time, be subject to slow eld and their bright days to waning.
The very imposition of order and structure brought change and eventual decline even to the immortal beings. They sacrificed a portion of their own timeless nature in order to create light and order for the world of elves and men.
It's an enormous conceptual shift, where even the Valar become victims of the systems they create. The sun and moon are set, and the great history of the First Age begins, though in this early version, it's far more compressed and darker than its later incarnation.
Yeah, the narrative here is framed as the tale told by Gilfanon of Taverbel.
And Gilfanon is important because he's presented as one of the oldest of the fairies, having traveled widely in the Great Lands and become a companion of men.
His perspective is unique. He bridges the gap between Valinor and the newly illuminated world of mortals.
First, we learn more about the elves who refuse the Great Journey, the Dark Elves, or Ilkorins.
Sometimes called Quendi, the Lost Fairies. They remained at the Waters of Awakening and were found by Tu the Wizard, the Lord of Gloaming, who taught them deep magics.
Their isolation meant they were immediately involved in the great new event, the awakening of men.
The new children of Iluvatar, the Hildor, were found sleeping in Mermenalda, the Vale of Sleep, in the east, waiting for light.
And a dark elf named Nuin, the father of speech, awoke the first pair, Ermin and Elmir, and taught them the Ilkyrin tongue.
So the origin of language is placed firmly in the hands of the elves.
And only Ermin and Elmir were awake to see this spectacular first sunrise, since the Valar launched the sunship from Valinor in the west.
The sun rose in the west and traversed the sky to set in the east for that first cosmic day, a truly unique and unforgettable vision for the first mortals.
But this peaceful beginning is immediately corrupted.
Of course it is. Melko, now established in Angmandi, the Hells of Iron, sent his malice into the world. He sent a servant, Fukil or Fungli, to pervert men.
And this servant taught them treachery, hatred, and the worship of Melko, quickly turning the newly awakened race away from their peaceful, elvish teachers.
This corruption led to the first tragic conflict between the children of Ilúvatar. The corrupted men treacherously fell upon the Ilkyrins in the Battle of Pallasor.
And then they fled, becoming the wild and savage tribes who worshipped Melko, laying the groundwork for the future history of conflict between the races of men.
Meanwhile, the Noldoli, the gnomes, had finished their arduous journey. Feanor's son, later Maedhros, led a host seeking vengeance against Melko.
Believing they could retrieve their lost honor, but the vengeance fails.
Immediately and brutally, Maedhros was captured at Angmandi, tortured and maimed, not primarily over the Silmarils, which were still a developing concept,
but because he refused to reveal the secret art of gem-making.
Melko wanted the Noldoli's knowledge, their greatest craft, and Maedhros paid the price.
This rapidly culminates in the great defeat known as the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, or Dagor Nu and Gizaya.
And unlike the later version, which spans centuries, this early account is compressed and immediate. It was a devastating, overwhelming defeat.
Vast numbers of gnomes became Melko's thralls, bound by his spell and his immediate power. The defeat was nearly total.
The only survival was Turgon's host, which managed to cut their way out and escape to Gondolin.
Even in this earliest tale, Gondolin is established as the final, isolated refuge.
The only place where the Noldoli were free from Melko's direct, crushing spell. It paints a picture of intense, immediate suffering. The Noldoli moved from the height of divine glory in Valinor to utter defeat, servitude, and secrecy in the Great Lands within a single, swift generation.
The first stage, as sketched out here, is relentlessly tragic and dark from its very first moments. We've traced the radical origins of this mythology, from the whimsical, trumpeting gods and the Viking ship world floating on the Vi, to the agonizing birth of the sun, and the swift, brutal defeat of the Noldoli in the newly lit world.
This exploration of the Book of Lost Tales shows us the immense imaginative energy Tolkien had right from the start. It's a mythology in motion, vibrant, contradictory, and deeply physical.
And it required years of intense intellectual labor to refine into the stately tone of the Silmarillion.
Absolutely, and we see how even small, profound details were preserved through that long evolution.
The idea of the mountains being built from stone pulled from Eromani, or the ships burning at Losgar.
These little anchors survived and were profoundly deepened, carrying the weight of the larger, sadder history.
The Lost Tales are a shortcut not just to knowledge, but to understanding the underlying DNA of the legendarium, the initial artistic choices, the ones that were kept, and the ones that were consciously sacrificed for the sake of the greater narrative coherence.
I think so.
So what does this all mean for us, the readers who cherish the final published work?
For me, what stands out most profoundly is that original raw tension between elvish eternal life and man's mortal freedom.
Even in this early text, where the fate of men is still tied up in that Christian framework of punishment and reward, the essential conflict remains, the allure of immortality.
The elves are tied to the fate of the world. Men are promised a unique escape.
This brings us back to our traveler, Eriol, in the Cottage of Lost Play, who spent all this time learning the tragic history of the elves.
And we know that he later desperately begged for a draught of the immortal elvish drink, Limpi, from the Lady of the Isle.
Lindo, one of his hosts, had to warn him, saying, "Overpass the bounds that Ilúvatar hath set." Eriol knew that the savor of Limpi and the blessedness of the elves might not be his forever.
He had seen the tragedy of the Noldoli, the judgment laid upon the immortals, and yet he still longed for that life.
So you should reflect on the nature of that longing. The elves' magic, their enduring connection to the fading beauty of the world, was so powerfully alluring that a mortal man would willingly trade his supposed gift of freedom,
The eventual escape from the world.
for even a temporary taste of their eternal world-bound life.
The tension remains. Was the freedom of mortality truly superior to elvish eternal life? Or Was the elves' magic simply too magnificent to resist, even knowing the inevitable grief and sorrow that came with it?
That profound desire for a life not meant for you remains the core engine of the entire legendarium, even in its earliest, wildest form.
A fascinating tension.
And on that note, we bid you farewell from this deepest of dives.